Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Unit 5. Welcome back to
Tapes.
Tapes. I'm your host, Jaden Calderon, with your other host.
Anthony Santos.
And today we have a special guest with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself, special guest?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Malachi. I'm a senior at SPHS, and that's all for today.
Okay, yes.
So, Jaden, this unit is called Land and Water Use, and this unit of apes accounts for 10 to 15% of the total exam weight.
And I'll tell them what that means.
Jaden, I told you this last time. I'm going to tell you again. I don't know.
Okay, so how should we begin?
How should we begin?
So, firstly, this unit will start with the tragedy of the commons.
You
so-
remember that, right?
Yeah, I do. So I will explain that. Thank
Okay.
you. So the tragedy of the commons suggests that individuals will use shared resources in their own self-interest rather than in keeping with the common good, therefore depleting and degrading the resources.
Mm-hmm. So, Jaden, what is the commons?
Well, the commons are an area used by everyone but regulated by nobody.
So, can you give me an example of, tragedy of the commons?
So a tragedy of the commons includes cattle grazing, overfishing, atmospheric pollution, and logging.
Okay. So, why do you look like that? So, I don't really remember. I remember a little bit of this unit. I mean, not unit. This topic.
Yeah.
It was really easy. It was just one day.
Yeah.
Don't tell us. So, Jaden, how do we prevent tragedy of the commons then?
Well, to prevent it, governments can regulate with hunting licenses. They could get land use permits. People require that.
Mm-hmm.
They got country quotas for pollution and fish harvesting,
Mm-hmm.
and then treaties like the Kyoto Protocol.
Which we will be delving in
Yeah.
in later topics.
And then laws or fines and incentives to try to get rid of
if you overfish too much, they'll give you a fine. So before we get to our next topic, we need to remember that forest ecosystem and ecological services that they're really important to the environment because it serves as a habitat, it aids in soil formation, it moderates local climate, and serves as a food source, along with other very vital services to organisms, and it also provides economic benefits like grazing for livestock, agricultural land, ecotourism, and it can even impact real estate values. And our next topic, we will be delving into clear cutting, which is the removal or cutting of all trees in the land. And clear cutting, the ecological and economic benefits that I just talked about, they're gone because there's no longer trees in the environment. And clear cutting creates a loss of biodiversity, a loss of habitat, a loss of recreational areas. Yes. Loss of food source and a loss of habitat. Soil carbon and topsoil is also reduced on top of the fact when we use clear cutting, and that could also lead to desertification because the topsoil is blown away and is washed away with runoff. And clear cutting also increases the albedo of of the soil, and water vapor is also removed, which can also lead to desertification. And then mudslides and landslides can they occur more frequently because of the precipitation runoff. There's also atmospheric causes to clear cutting because of the high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The trees can no longer take in that carbon dioxide when photosynthesizing, so there's just an excess amount of it in the atmosphere, and the decomposition in the soil is also greatly increased because of all the dead trees releasing methane and carbon dioxide, which are greenhouse gases, which you will learn later are really bad for the environment. And transpiration is also decreased. Oh boy, it's a long unit. Clear cutting also not only has terrestrial causes, it also has aquatic causes because it increases turbidity. Whoa. And turbidity is defined as the amount of suspended solids in the water, and it also decreases aquatic primary productivity. It blocks out sunlight, which means that photosynthesis can't be achieved in aquatic organisms that need photosynthesis to create energy to live. And it also decreases the albedo, which increases the temperature, and it also decreases dissolved oxygen levels. And because as water heats up, water can hold less dissolved oxygen levels, which can also lead to increased nutrient load and algae blooms. Oh, and also known as like eutrophication, which you will learn on in Unit 8. And it also just leads to like a loss of biodiversity in general because of the lost habitat. Anyways, y'all just seen that BS. So, Jaden, can you tell us what the revolution is?
Okay. Well, firstly, we don't know what the Green Revolution is. So, the Green Revolution is a large scale, productive, operational shift to new agricultural strategies and practices in order to increase food production.
Mm-hmm.
Mechanical, monocultural, artificial fertilizers, and pesticide irrigation methods, GMOs used,
And
genetically
so, like,
modified
the Green
organisms.
Revolution introduced all of these like methods, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
So,
Jaden, what is mechanization then?
yes. Well, mechanization is the use of machines in agriculture.
So,
So,
mechanization is also known as the use of machines in agriculture,
yeah,
and
the introduction of
mechanization.
machines or automatic
Keep
devices
on cutting
into a
my mic,
process,
bitch.
activity, or place.
Okay. So,
Mechanization has its pros.
mhm,
It's hard labor is like the hard labor of
like
whatever.
humans, yeah.
Yeah, it's taken away. Can be specialized and updated, and it's easy to use, and it creates like higher profits.
Mm-hmm.
But it also does have its cons, like fossil fuel use, extraction, and combustion,
So, Jaden,
which
wait.
are all like environmental problems that we learn in this topic.
Mm-hmm. So, Jaden, you also mentioned monoculture when you were talking about all the methods created from the green evolution. Can you tell us what monoculture means?
Monoculture is the cultivation of a single crop in a given area.
So, is there pros and cons to monoculture?
So the pros of it is it's easy to plant, maintain, and maintain, harvest, and it's easy to control pesticides because the cultivation of the plant is like one plant in
Mm-hmm.
large rows of acres. But then it does have its cons, which is a loss of habitat and biodiversity, and a loss of ancestral varieties, and there's catastrophic events can occur more often.
So, Jaden, last thing, what is an ancestral variety?
Gene pools of a species.
Okay, Jaden, I also saw that you mentioned artificial fertilizers. What is an artificial fertilizer?
An artificial fertilizer is any material of natural or synthetic origin that is applied to soil or to plant tissues to supply plant nutrients, nitrates, phosphorus, or potassium.
So, are there any are there pros and cons to using artificial fertilizers?
So the pros of using artificial fertilizers is it releases nutrients over time, and it can be customized for plant grown, and can be mass produced, easily dispersed, and ensure like higher yields. But
Mm-hmm.
then it does come with its cons, which is easily dissolvable in runoff, disrupts nitrogen cycle, and causes eutrophication, which is like, what do you call it? Oxygen
They'll learn about it in
dissolving.
Unit 8. It's fine. We don't have to talk about it right now. And lastly, I saw that you mentioned pesticides. What are pesticides, and what are the pros and cons to pesticides, Jaden?
Well, the a pesticide is a man-made chemical designed to specifically kill or repel pests. Three types of pesticides include herbicide, insecticide, fungicide. Pesticides do have its pros, which is it's customizable. It could be mass-produced. It's easily dispersed, and it like
Ensures a
gains
higher
higher
yield.
yield. And but then the cons is it also targets non-targeted species, and it affects human health.
Mm-hmm.
It contaminates groundwater, and pests can grow tolerance to
Which
the
is
pesticides.
which is also known as a pesticide treadmill. Now we won't go over pest control methods right now, but we'll dive into it in later like topics. Oh boy, oh brother, I forgot I wrote so much. Um, so Jaden, one last thing, what is irrigation?
So irrigation is the watering of crops. It's basically like bringing water to an area that doesn't have agua.
Agua. Yes, like this aquatic ass
Yes.
pussy.
Three,
Yes.
two, one.
Yes.
Yes.
So, are there pros and cons to irrigation?
Well, irrigation does have its pros. It's customizable. Maximum yields due to like sufficient water use. But then the cons are depletion of already low freshwater resources, environmental effects like salinization and waterlogging.
And lastly, and this is a controversial topic, GMOs, also
Ooh.
known as genetically
This is why
modified.
America's obese.
Right.
So GMOs are human directed evolution that selects only the most desirable traits for humans that take advantage of genetic material from normally incompatible different species, creating new traits in host species.
So, Jaden, I know a lot of people might not like this, but what are the pros and cons of GMOs?
So the pros for GMOs is it creates plants that can grow on one inhospitable land, like drought, heat resistant,
Mitski
salt tolerant
reference?
environments. Herbicide resistant, creates their own insecticide, which the use of DNA modification,
And it also
and it
lessens.
lessens the use of herbicides.
Mhm.
But then the cons,
Oh boy.
not the con artist. The cons of it is semiarid,
Semi-arid?
and arid environments have low nutrient availability. So although we create resistant plants, they will lack nutrients. Insecticides created by crop kill non-target species, and the moral ethical issue.
Along with GMOs.
How would you feel if your children were genetically modified?
Right.
Yeah,
Like we got like Chick-fil-A.
yeah,
They started adding. They're about to add GMOs to their meat.
right,
Although they were known for literally not doing it, but now they are. And a lot
right.
of people find that like very
How
controversial.
about they take the GMOs out and put something fresh?
Right. Okay. So Jaden, you mentioned semi-arid and arid environments, and how although we create resistant plants, they will lack nutrients. So basically, what that means is like in an inhospitable environment, although GMOs create like plants that can resist and can grow on that, there's like the really bad soil already there is like it lacks nutrients. So basically, even though we can't like we created plants that can grow in that environment, they're gonna lack a lot of nutrients that they need to grow like properly. Anyways, we're also done with that topic. Thank God. Um, Jaden, what are the
Yes.
impacts of these agricultural practices? And what is and as I and what is arable land?
Arable land.
Like what I mentioned
Arable
earlier.
land is land that is capable of producing crops.
Mhm.
Non-arable land causes
Oh, like that. Like, what causes non-arable land?
are things like tilling. It's the preparation of soil to plant seeds. Bare soil, which is soil erosion and water, and turn soil, altered soil structure, which is CO2 is released, and
Hmm.
then mechanized farming, which causes carbon emissions and fossil fuel use.
Something else that causes non-arable land is slash and burn agriculture, which is where wild or forested land is clear cut and any remaining vegetation is burned, like a controlled burn. This releases CO2 emissions, and the cut down of new plot, which leads to desertification and decreased water infiltration. And one last vocabulary word that you need to know is intensive agriculture, which is the loss of ancestral crop varieties. So, Jaden,
Yes, sir.
how how I mentioned before about the fertilizers?
Yeah.
We have synthetic, which is man-made, versus organic fertilizer, which is like made organically. Um, so oh wait, whoops, my bad. So the upsides of synthetic fertilizer is that it is easy to transport and use. You can time the release of when you want to use the fertilizer, and it is also customizable. But synthetic fertilizer must be gathered. Um, Nutrient levels of the synthetic fertilizer is unknown, and it is harder to use. We also have organic fertilizer, which can be worked into soil, and it contains partially digested vegetation, which can improve the soil structure. But the downsides of organic fertilizer is that it's water soluble, which means like the runoff from like you know what organic fertilizer is mostly made of. It's mostly made of poop, and that runoff can go into water and contaminate the water. Um, and it also leads to eutrophication. And organic fertilizer is often overused, and it does nothing to improve the soil structure. So, Jaden, I bet you remember a
Yes.
lot about this topic. Do you remember irrigation methods?
Maybe I do. So irrigation methods. 70% of fresh water is used by agriculture. Flood irrigation is one of the methods. It's like a body of water with the use of gravity and is diverted into a crop field.
Mhm.
The pros of this is it's easy to manufacture and maintain, and you only have to dig deep crop fields.
And it's
And it's
also inexpensive.
inexpensive.
Yeah.
The cons, though, it requires nearby water, not for all plant types, and leaves, which like walls, are needed. Like 20% is lost to evaporation and waterlogging and
And it also leads
salinization.
to waterlogging and salinization. Now,
I
it is
just said
important to
that.
remember like how much of water is lost to evaporation because, as Jaden said before, because 70% of fresh water is used by agriculture, the loss of that fresh water is very impactful. Hey guys. And I'm gonna continue on to the irrigation methods. Furrow irrigation, which is where furrows or trenches of water are built onto crop rows. Think of it like Minecraft. Like that's the best example I could think of when I was researching this topic.
Yes, I love
You know how like Minecraft, like
Minecraft.
how you like plant rows and then you put the
Yeah,
water and then a
yeah,
row of crops again and then
yeah,
water.
yeah,
You play Minecraft, right?
yeah,
Yeah, just think of it like that. And
yeah,
the pros of furrow
yeah.
irrigation is that it is a low investment. It is very low investment, and it leads to high sediment water. But the cons is that because of the furrows, it's not efficient on sandy soil, um, and 33% of the fresh water used is lost to evaporation, which can also lead to salinization. And then we also have spray irrigation, which is when pumps spray water out of a nozzle directly onto the plants.
3, 2, 1.
Yes, think
Yes.
of it like an actual spray bottle, like
Yeah.
spray, like spritz, 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 spritz. The pros of spray irrigation is its position. It's like it's precise. And supplements can also be used in spray irrigation, and less than 25% of water is lost to evaporation. And spray irrigation can also be used multiple times a day. But the cons of spray irrigation is that it is very expensive. It has
Yeah.
larger upfront costs, and it also uses fossil
Like when you go to
fuels.
the hair salon and you like try to buy a spray bottle, you know how much that costs? Imagine that on a larger scale.
Right, and it uses pipes. And it uses pipes. And because spray irrigation is a machine, pivot systems can wear ruts, which is like a depression or a cut in the soil. And lastly, we have drip irrigation, which is where pipes with micropores drip like little tiny drops of water directly onto the plant roots. And the pros of drip irrigation is that it leads to very low evaporation rates, like 5%. It reduces nutrient leaching, and it works good with sandy soil. But the cons of drip irrigation is that it is very expensive, and that these micropores, since they're like still holes, they can clog easily. And mechanization is also required, and also the placement of pipes can be damaged accidentally by the tilling of the soil. Um, as always, there's always gonna be consequences. Like for some reason, there always has to be a consequence of like agricultural practices, including waterlogging, salinization, and ground and aquifers, which is basically groundwater. And because this groundwater is used up extensively, it cannot replenish quickly. It cannot replenish its water more than it is being used, which leads to aquifer overuse. And then we also have saltwater intrusion, but this only happens in coastal aquifers. Jaden,
Yeah.
you know a lot about pest control methods because you are a pest. You want to tell us about pest control methods? But first of
Sure.
all, continuing what I said earlier, Jaden, what is a pesticide treadmill?
So, Anthony. So A pesticide treadmill is a situation in which more and more and increasingly toxic concentration of pesticides are used to control insects and weeds, which can then develop resistance to the pesticide and create genetic variety, like resistance to pesticides.
Now we went over the pros in the Green Revolution. If you want to look back on them, you can always just like tap the left
Rewind,
side of your screen.
rewind,
But we will be
rewind, rewind. Helpless guys, guys,
yes, it's
guys.
YouTube Rewind 2018 all over again. But anyways, we will be going over the cons of pest control methods. Now, Jaden, there are many different kinds of cons of pest control methods. It I can on my slides it's showing me that it affects the environment and animals. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, oh, sorry, it got a little hot in here. So the cons for the environment are pesticides runoff kills organisms in streams, runoff infiltration to groundwater. Um, it leads to contaminated drinking water, and it could be carried by wind to unintended areas. Then the cons for animals are killing of non-target species, biomagnification, which is topic 8.8,
Mm-hmm.
GMOs.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cons, killing of non-target species creates genetic varieties, monoculture.
Which we did gloss over in the Green Revolution as well. Um, meat production. Meat production methods. This is the next topic. So basically, meat production is the raising of cattle, chicken, turkey, Jaden, also known as pigs, sheep, goats, me, and any other
You
livestock for consumption. Anyways, overconsumption of meat is a really really big issue in like developed countries. And because we keep on over consuming meat, we have to grow animals. Like we have to grow animals, which leads to negative consequences. Like land use, which is where large areas of land are used for livestock, and because land is so scarce, since we have like not that much of it, like 25% of land on Earth is used to raise this livestock. And then we also have animal waste and emissions. These the animal waste could end up in waterways, which um also happen in clear, which we also talked about in clear cutting. It leads to fecal coliforms, which is like E. coli. You know what E. coli is, Jaden,
Yeah,
right?
we have lost as a prime
Right.
example.
Which E. coli is like it's a really bad bacteria. It negatively impacts human health. Oh, here's the definition right here. Fecal coliforms are bacteria found in fecal waste of mammals. And we also have antibiotic and growth hormone use, which is the artificial selection which creates resistant bacteria. We also have soil compaction, which is where animals in a densely packed location for long periods of time reduces infiltration of water. And we will be going over crop versus meat production. Crops are way better to like they're like a way better source of food than meat is because crops only use water while meat uses water for crops to feed um to feed like our meaty friends, and water is also used for meat. And with crops you emit no greenhouse gas emissions, but with meat you emit methane from beef, you emit N2O emissions from the decomposing waste of these animals. And with you get it basically. Crops are just like overall better to grow with our already sacred land, not sacred, scarce land than meat is. Because meat overconsumption is very like problematic.
Yeah,
Now these we have two different types of production methods, which are CAFOs, also known as concentrated animal feeding operations, and free range grazing. CAFOs are defined as the raising of cattle and livestock in a concentrated, a densely packed together area, being fed with high caloric food to reach maximum yield, which is like the like imagine like trying to fatten up a cow, like big enough, but like it doesn't die, but it's used for human consumption basically. Now the pros of CAFOs is that they're large and efficient, Cleaning waste becomes easier because it's so easy, because like since these animals are so tightly compacted, it's just easy to take out their dookie. And costs are reduced for consumers because the production companies, they don't have to use as much land and as much like food, like, which free grazing, you'll learn about it. But cons, because it's such a crowded area, there's like a lot of waste. And this waste leads to what's known as a manure lagoon. You remember that, Jaden, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. That's probably why you smell like that. You probably swim in one. But
Oh.
anyways, it creates manure lagoons. It leads to water contamination, which as I don't know how many more times I'm gonna say this, but it leads to eutrophication, and it also leads to fecal coliforms. And then we also have what's known as free range grazing, which is the raising of cattle and livestock in free range areas, being fed natural foods. Like, for example, cows, they will be fed grass instead of like in a CAFO where they would be fed like wheat pellets. And then like for chickens, they would eat insects instead of like the nutrient rich food that they have to eat in a CAFO. The pros of free range grazing is that it has less transmission of disease since the animals are so far spread apart. Um, Little to no antibiotics are used because they're not in compacted areas where they can easily contract more diseases, and waste is not as concentrated. I don't care. But anyways, the cons of free range grazing is that because like they're allowed to free and roam as they please, they use more land per unit area. Free range grazing is also very expensive, and it leads to less maximum yield. It also leads to overgrazing, and it leads to soil degradation. And overgrazing is defined as the excess grazing, feeding, which causes damage to a grassland. Now we move on from like land animals to sea animals. Jaden, can you tell us the impacts of overfishing?
So, Anthony.
What's with the voice?
Oh, my bad. I wanted to try
No,
something
it's
new.
fine. It's fine. You could like say it if you want.
Commercial fishing. Fishing on a massive scale for commercial marketing.
What are these commercial fishing techniques then?
Well, some of these commercial fishing techniques are long line, long,
Which
evenly spaced
are
out hooks,
mhm.
drill net, which is long nets placed at varying depths, purse seine, purse like net, draw top and bottom shut to capture fish,
Like
like a
basically think of it
bowl.
like a bowl picking
The
up,
cons of all three, non-target species are caught and
and it
overfishing.
leads to overfishing. Yeah.
Trawling is also another one. Cone shaped. It's a cone shaped net. You drag it across the bottom of the seafloor to capture fish. And the cons are the ecosystem gets destroyed along with fishing operations, and along with other cons stated above.
Like the non-target species
Then
which
there's
are caught and
sonar,
overfishing.
which allows for fishers to see the seafloor and schools of fish with sound pulses. And the con of this is marine mammals like whales that use sound waves to navigate are disrupted by the sonar, and it helps with overfishing.
So, Jaden, how can we make, like, since overfishing is such a big problem, how can we make fishing more sustainable?
So that you can place catch limits based on the maximum sustainable yield. You can limit the age/size of a fish, the fish caught. Catch fish mostly not of reproductive age, and then modify techniques to reproduce. To
To
reduce
reduce.
bycatch. And then you create laws and treaties to protect critical species, like the
Like
U.S.
the
Endangered Species Act,
and you
the
remember
CITES, which is
sites.
the
Oh
Convention
boy.
on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, which is animals and plants,
Yeah.
and then laws like incentives and fines.
Wait, Jaden, before we go on to the next topic, you remember sites, right?
Yeah.
That was not genuine. Anyways, moving on from the fishy, like the, ooh, wait, moving on from like fishes and stuff, we go back to land. Um, Jaden, I know you can't afford gold or diamonds, and the only thing you can afford is cheap silver made like materials. But Jaden, what are the impacts of mining?
What?
What are the impacts of mining, Jaden?
So, Anthony
First of
Santos,
all, Jaden Calderon, before we begin, what is the mining? What is it defined as?
mining.
Yes.
Mining is obtaining minerals from the ground, like gold, diamonds, phosphorus, bearing rock, gravel, and coal. Well,
We also
refining,
yeah
right?
yeah.
Refining is an industrial process that removes impurities from a substance.
You'll learn about this in a
Now,
bit.
Anthony, tell me like the process of refining.
So when you mine an ore, it usually comes with impurities, just like all the impurities on Jaden's body. But besides that, when you mine, you get an ore which usually has impurities, and like to refine, as what Jaden defined before, you remove the ore impurities. And mining methods can include surface mine, strip mining, mountaintop removal, which is the clearing of mountain formation for minerals, and lastly, open pit mines. I save this one for last because open pit mine is defined as like you keep on digging down for the same hole. Also, going back to Minecraft, you know how like in Minecraft, like when you dig straight down,
Yeah,
like
and
you
then you
make like
fall
a
into
little
the lava
staircase,
and
like you
die.
no, not like digging straight down, like you make a little staircase, like you
Yes, yes,
like in a
Anthony.
zigzag pattern. Yeah, I feel like that's the best example that I could give. Refining also removes the overburden, which is the material above the rock, above the ore, which could be like the random rock above it, or like soil. And spoil, which is defined as like the overburden after it is removed. Um, and then ore, which leads to the target material, which is the pure refined ore. And it also removes the tailings. Tailings as is defined as the impurities, which are similar to spoils, but not really, with methods like cyanide heap leaching. We'll go into that in a bit on why cyanide heap leaching is like bad for the environment. But right now, all you need to know is that that's a method that you can use to remove tailings.
See,
So
senor.
Jaden,
Yes, Anthony.
you know, like mining, like it's kind of bad for the environment. Like, can you tell us the environmental consequences of mining? Or not? It seems like I'll do it on my own.
Oh, I'm
Anyways,
sorry. No, I'll do it. I'll
um,
do it. No, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll
the
do it. No, cut that.
environmental
Cut that.
consequences.
Cut it!
No, no, because you want to be on fucking.
No, Anthony, stop! Stop!
So, environmental consequences of mining. Um, Soil erosion due to the removal of the earth, which leads to desertification, and it leads to a lower albedo. And then we also have that the mining equipment, since they burn fossil fuels, it releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And like rock material can also end up in rivers, which leads to turbidity, decreased albedo, and an increased oxygen levels. And then we also have acid mine drainage, which is defined as tailings with iron and sulfur bearing compounds. For an example, pyrite, also known as fool's gold, which I know Jaden uses a lot because he can't afford actual gold. Um,
Oh,
Pyrite forms sulfuric acid, um, and this acidic compound can be run off into water streams, which leads to a lower pH in the water. And then, as I said before, we have cyanide heap leaching, which is a waste slurry full of cyanide, which can affect the local environment if left exposed, or if it's leaked into like water, or if it's left in the environment. Last thing you need to know is that we can remediate like um the environmental, like the damage that we do with mining, with mine remediation. Mine remediation is defined as to fix a mining area as close as it was to an ecologically functional state, and by grading land, enriching soil, planting new vegetation, removing tailings, and using bioremediation. For example, like an open pit. Think of like an open pit. Since it's so like wide, like since it's a hole basically. You can create a recreational lake, or you can also use that open pit as a landfill, which helps the environment instead of leaving it like just a big hole in the land. Another topic in this unit is the impact of urbanization.
Yes.
Tell us, Jaden. First of all, define what urbanization is, Jaden.
So, urbanization is the shift from rural agriculture to urban development.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The advantages of this is mass transit, which in turn lowers fossil fuel emissions. Buildings of all types are close together, which stores, government buildings, offices, etc. And then space efficient, high density for like human populations.
Okay, can I talk about the buildings real quick? Like the
Yes.
buildings, since like let's say you have like let's think of like a normal block. Like you have your houses on one side, and then you have like the corner bodega. And let's say we're like in the city, you have like a bunch of stores lined up, and then you have like a bodega in the corner, and then you have like a building, like a work building in another corner. Like that's an efficient space. That's an efficient use of urbanization. But Jaden, what are the disadvantages of urbanization then?
So, Anthony, the disadvantages of urbanization, it impacts the water and carbon cycles,
It impact
saltwater intrusion, water diversion, and burning of fossil fuels from like industry use, and
like
then
cars,
cars,
yeah.
etc. Impermeable surfaces like the concrete, it doesn't allow like for the recharge of groundwater aquifers,
Mm-hmm.
which is like water that runs off. Ooh, backtrack. Water that runs off picks up pollution and waste, air pollution, and then urban sprawl, heat islands.
So Jaden, what is urban sprawl and what is heat islands?
Urban sprawl, as defined by Webster Dictionary, is as more people migrate to
It's
cities,
not Webster's
they have
dictionary. It's
less
my own
places to
definition.
live, living in suburban areas around the city.
Mm-hmm.
Heat
And
islands are impermeable surfaces like roads. Because they have a low albedo, they cause temperatures to rise.
okay. So
That is
as
so
I
real. You ever touch the concrete on a
wait,
hot
stay for
summer's
like two
day,
minutes. I'll
like a
bring you in
hot
here.
summer's eve,
Uh-huh.
like a hot summer's day?
Hmm.
You ever touch the concrete?
It's so hot.
Burning,
It
burning, pussy hot,
pussy hot. Come
pussy
help me,
hot.
help me. Ooh, the
Yeah.
pussy.
Ooh,
Okay.
air the pussy out. Yeah.
So as I mentioned before with mining, we can remediate these the impacts of urbanization. Remediation is the action of remedying something, in particular of reversing or stopping environmental damage. For example, planting more vegetation in like the city in like an area can be helpful because it reduces impermeable surfaces like concrete, um, because it allows for like soil. It recharges, which in turn recharges the groundwater. It increases albedo, decreasing the heat island effect, and it takes in carbon dioxide, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And something like public transport also decreases someone's carbon footprint. And we can also use urban planning to remediate the impacts of urbanization. Like, for example, growing up instead of out. Like, instead of building out of a city, we build more towards the sky. Like, we build up instead of out, basically.
Uh huh.
Like multi-story buildings,
The Twin Towers,
those are gone now. Rest in
the
peace.
Empire
We
State
blink for
Building.
Waz. Anyways, um,
Yes, we blame Fawaz for everything.
we can renovate abandoned areas into repurposed spaces like playgrounds, which contain an aesthetic and vegetative purpose like trees and plants. Like a playground has trees and plants, which, as I said before, it like reduces the impermeable surface, da da da, like I mentioned before. And then
Yes.
something new that has been going around recently is the use of permeable pavements, which allows water to infiltrate into groundwater aquifers.
Oh wait, is it like that? Like kind of like that new asphalt that they have like on the roads with like all the holes in it.
Yeah. You would know a lot about that.
Oh, yeah, I can see all your pores.
Jaden, you remember when we did that project on sustainability? Well, not project. We did like that thing on sustainability,
Yes.
and you got like a really bad score.
Yeah. Like how you got a bad score on your physical.
So, Jaden, before we get into the topic of the introduction to sustainability, tell us what sustainability like. What is defined as, Jaden?
So, sustainability is the ability to use and maintain a resource indefinitely for future generations.
Mm-hmm.
Sustainable yield, the amount of a renewable resource that can be taken without reducing the available supply. Usually
In animals,
50%
this is like
of carrying
yeah,
capacity.
in yeah. So basically, a sustainable outcome is where the input, which is what is being replenished, equals the output amount, which is what is being like used, like what's taking out. And we also have unsustainable, and then we have unsustainable, which is where the input is less than the output, which leads to the lack of resources for future use. And then we also have wasteful, which is where the input is greater than the output, which leads to overflow of resource. And it basically like since we don't really use the resource, it's just wasteful in general. And environmental indicators that can help with sustainability is biological diversity, which preserves nature, food production. Um, we can use more sustainable food practices, um, global surface global surface temperatures slash CO2 concentrations, which we can use less energy, human populations, demographic transition, and then with resource depletion, we can reduce, reuse, and recycle. Yes.
Yes!
So, Jaden, what is integrated pest management?
Um, a combination of methods used to reduce and eliminate pest species using biological, physical, and chemical controls. Biological controls are pest predators like cats that kill mice, praying mantises that prey on crickets. Physical controls
Ironic.
introduce barriers that protect crops like traps and screens. Chemical controls are like poisons that kill pest species like herbicide, pesticides. Other IPM methods, recall lab we did like on computer.
Okay.
And
You
then
remember that that like farming
yes,
thing
I
we did?
remember.
Yeah. Okay.
So crop rotation, which is like switching crops every growing season. By doing so, pest species do not accumulate in large enough numbers, and then intercropping which is like the growing of different crops planting next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Integrated
So
pest management do have negative effects. Biological, chemical. The removal of non-target species may consume harsh chemicals, leading to biomagnification, like we were talking about, like in 8.8, which we will be learning about. Runoff into bodies of waters, leading to water pollution and killing of non-target organisms and plants. And then it also causes impacts on our health, like rashes and diarrhea, like in Africa. So there's also another topic in this called sustainable agriculture. This is the preservation of soil, which is like essential to maintaining sustainable food production. Do you want to know how to reduce soil erosion? Well, I'll tell you right now. Contour plowing, which is planting on hills and mountains, which preserves natural topography and leaves soil intact.
mm-hmm.
There's windbreaks, the introduction of trees and shrubs, which reduces wind erosion that blows away soil. There's strip cropping. This is harvesting of one crop at a time, leaving other crops intact, which leaves the soil in place. And then no-till agriculture, the removal of plowing, tilling, which leaves soil in place and does not loosen soil. Then there's perennial crops, which are crops that do not have to be planted, but fruit can be plucked, like strawberries and blueberries, and it increases soil fertility. Crop rotation, limestone also adds
Oh.
calcium to soil, increasing the pH.
Um.
Then the next thing we're also
Wait.
going to talk about.
Jaden, I know you want to get it done, but so as Jaden said before, we can also increase the soil fertility of soil by like using crop rotation and just adding limestone to soil, which, as Jaden said, adds calcium to the soil, which increases the pH. Um, Aquaculture. That's another topic. Jaden, tell us what is
Yes.
aquaculture.
So Aquaculture is the farming of fish, shellfish, mollusks, crustaceans, or aquatic plants by an individual or corporation with the intent of selling farmed organisms for commercial profit.
Think of it like an aquatic farm.
Yes, aquaculture is important because as the human population increases and middle class expands, the demand for quality protein sources increases. Fish harvests have been decreasing worldwide since since 1990s, and aquaculture provides needed income to fish folk. Aquaculture is more efficient at producing animal protein than terrestrial agriculture and requires far less fossil fuel use. Aquaculture also helps mitigate overfishing and provides affordable protein to human populations. So the downsides of aquaculture include waste from organisms causes hypoxic conditions and algae blooms, uneaten food pellets pollute waterways, infectious diseases and parasites spread more easily this way and may spread to wild populations. Then the last thing in this unit is sustainable
Finally.
forestry.
What is sustainable forestry,
So
Jaden?
sustainable forestry is a collection of methods that attempt to mitigate the human impact of harvesting trees and using forest resources. Sustainable forestry methods include select tree cutting, IPM, and selective tree removal. Reforestation. This is the restocking of existing forests and woodland that have been depleted, and reusing wood, then controlled prescribed burns.
And that's it.
Yay!
Yes!
Yes! So how'd you
This
feel
was
about?
such a long.
Yes,
unit.
I wanted
Wow.
to.
I want to die.
I wanted to die. But how did you feel about that unit?
It was
Bored.
It was no, it wasn't really boring.
It was
I
boring.
would say. If you think it's boring, then yeah. But like, I feel. I mean, we did spend most of our unit. We spent like a month, I would say, on
You're
this
right.
unit in AP.
We did.
Like, you remember the mining thing with the cookies,
Yeah.
and then all those labs, like the farming one that we
Yeah.
talked about earlier. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot.
It was,
For
and I ate
future
that
AP
cookie,
students,
and I ate those
brace yourselves.
cookies.
Oh, we know you ate them.
I ate them cookies.
You look like you ate them cookies.
Okay, you ate too many cookies. But anyways,
So,
I would rate that lesson 5 out of 10. How about you?
2 + 2 = 6, and let me tell you what.
Anywho, thank you for joining us in this week's episode of Tapes. I'm your host, Jaden Calderon.
And I'm your host, Anthony Santos.
And this is us logging off.
Bye.
Bye.